But you see, the president of the country, it's a proper mafia. We know that he's running this farm, money is being stolen. And then, like a proper mafia, he goes, catches people, terrorizes them, give them money to shut them up. I mean, he's running a parallel state, a parallel criminal state.
Nkululeko on Cultr. Nkululeko on Cultr. Hello and welcome to yet another episode of our beautiful podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you very much for liking, subscribing and commenting on the content. We've just passed 12,000 subscribers now. We keep it moving and keep it growing as well. Today we have a very special guest, someone very, very dear to my heart, someone I have consumed over the past 10 years more than any other political figure. Andile Mngxitama, thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah, are you phoning and you're about to be a politician?
No.
You want to use politics to kill politics?
Absolutely. I consider myself a revolutionary.
Yeah, no?
Yes.
Are you counter-revolutionary?
No. I mean, those are the people on the right wing.
You are on the left wing of the spectrum.
Yes, absolutely.
It was from you that I learned that our greatest contradiction, our primary contradiction as black people all over the world is the system of white supremacy. In, of course, more recent words that you've used is white monopoly capital. But I want to juxtapose that a little bit and add a twist to it. It seems if you're observing Operation Dudula, the primary contradiction for black people in South Africa seems to be other black people from other African countries.
Yes. The response of Operation Dudula is based on the misreading of the political problematic, if you like. And the white system has always created that dynamic to perpetuate itself, where it brings black against black. So the secondary contradictions, whether, for instance, how they colonize the whole world, they'll use Xhosa against Zulu, against Venda, and then colonize all of them at the end. I mean, this is true for Latin America. This is true for here. Yeah. The white system always find the little differences amongst us, magnify them, and then we murder each other, we finish each other off, and it perpetuates itself. I believe this is exactly the same situation with Operation Dudula, where people are fighting for crumbs, really. A system that oppresses all of us has created the situation where we're fighting amongst ourselves for the crumbs and not seeing the system. The system is very clever from that point of view, where our energies are wasted against one another, weakening each other. Even the political system, if you like, the multiple black political parties are part of the same divide and rules tactic.
Yeah, and you've argued as well, Uguti, and you're not the only one who's made this argument that we'll jump back to Operation Dudula in a moment, but just to piggyback on what you're saying, that there is no difference between the ANC and the EFF, and even to argue what the ANC seeks to achieve coincides with what the DA wants to achieve anyways. So it's like a farcical system.
Yes, I mean, we are trapped in a spectacle of difference, but not real difference.
It's a spectacle of difference.
It's a spectacle of difference. I mean, look at Parliament as the arena where this plays itself out. The EFF will say we want land expropriation, and then the ANC will say no, and then they fight. At the end of it, there will be no land expropriation. The white system is intact, and we keep on playing these games of we are fighting against each other. We are fighting even the system. I mean, the DA in South Africa today is the hegemonic political project. It gives direction to what must happen. And that is why the ANC and EFF fight. EFF gives the DA political power. White people rule us. It is again that whole thing of the secondary contradictions. The fight between the ANC and the EFF is a secondary battle. But it perpetuates the main contradiction of white power. I mean, really, a revolutionary movement giving political power to a racist white party under the pretext of fighting the ANC, which is itself a junior partner, really. I mean, it's like fighting bodyguards instead of fighting the real enemy. But this is how the system has perpetuated itself. This is how we all, black people in the world, ultimately got colonized. I mean, think about it. When they arrived in the Cape, the Khoisan was decimated. The Xhosa-speaking people did not come help the Khoisan. There was 100 years war of Xhosa-speaking people against the colonialists. You're telling me the Zulu-speaking people did not hear about this? The Venda-speaking people did not hear about this? No. They let the Xhosas get finished. And then they finished the Zulus. Then they went up north and finished everybody as they colonized. And we see this today manifesting again in the political formation. Black people are divided by political parties to weaken ourselves, and white people are a bloc, and they are able therefore to control the whole political system, meaning they're able to control even the economic reality.
Yeah, and on the face of it, just going back to Dudula as I opened with it, on the face of it, the black person's lived experience, explicitly what they're seeing is a restaurant employing a disproportionate amount of foreigners. And even with that dynamic, really, when I think about it deeper, the beneficiary is always going to be the capitalist, because when they remove me and you out of that restaurant, they remove the possibility of paying 3,000 rands per head, and they introduce a possibility of paying 900 per head, and they still win. But at a level of day-to-day interaction and engagement, your Uber Eats is delivered by a foreign national. And I think that there is a build-up to that point of frustration, and that's why a Dudula is romantic. It's romantic, and sometimes you worry whether or not it's organic and not instigated by the capitalists themselves.
I think all those elements are present. There's this Stellenbosch mafia guy, Rob Hertshoff.
Yes.
He's the biggest instigator and supporter of all the anti-immigrants movements, even political parties. He's friends with their leaders, he's hanging with them, and I believe he's sponsoring them. Now, that's part of removing. You see, the biggest threat was when Jacob Zuma was president and he was saying things like white monopoly capital. And that galvanizes us towards the main contradiction. And Operation Dudula removes our view from the main contradiction to the secondary contradiction. And white interest, white power understands that dynamic better, how to divide us. So Operation Dudula, in a sense, is part of diverting our attention from the main contradiction. And I believe that somebody like Rob Hertshoff understands that dynamic and understand another thing, black self-hate. Black self-hate has always been mobilized against black unity to make sure that the white system succeeds in using our own energies against one another, because we suffer from the psychological oppression which generates self-hate, and it is mobilized, this self-hate. We're fighting people from outside South Africa for jobs, badly paying jobs. We are not thinking about owning the country. So we're not talking about the ownership of this country, the wealth of this country. We're talking about fighting about jobs, very badly paying jobs. So we have accepted and internalized our positionality as subhuman and as second-class citizens who must work for white people to survive. And that is the biggest achievement of the white system, where it puts black people in a position where our identity is linked with subservienceness, with subjugation, with this idea that, we must just work to survive and leave the wealth in white hands. We are workers. By the way, to become a worker also was a creation of white people. We work for ourselves. We not work for anyone else. So the identity of a worker, which is created by white colonialism and slavery, is the one that we now are assuming and fighting for to maintain our position as second-class citizens.
Wow. And I suppose it's not going to go away, because as you are characterizing it, what's not going to go away is the discontent that is being felt by the South African as they see jobs with their own eyes moving from South Africans to foreign nationals. And I think that's something that we are going to have to contend with. Yes, I think so too, that there is an inorganic hand in stirring the pot, but I do think that the way that people are latching onto the movement, it somehow has found a place in their hearts which has legitimate, genuine grievances. I think that our people are genuinely aggrieved about the foreign nationals, the influx of foreign nationals in our country, and what they see day to day as being the erosion of work opportunities.
No, it is true. And if you look at our inner cities, they are overrun by foreign nationals.
Yeah.
And again, I believe this is a deliberate creation of white capital. For instance, in the townships, we have lost the spaza shop. It is no longer South African based.
Yep.
But not only the spaza shop, they also brought the mall, which is basically white capital implanted in the township. And so we have lost the little we had, and even more. The biggest buying capacity, again, we use our cash into white capital, which has located itself into the township.
Yeah.
So the idea of claiming the township economy must also attack the mall. The mall cannot belong to Stellenbosch in our township. And I believe the ownership of South African economy in the township was destroyed deliberately by the same big companies when they brought in the malls, and all of a sudden we could not compete with the mall.
Absolutely.
And of course the foreigners, if you like, they have better networks and are able to bargain, and they use their bargaining power to sustain the competition with white capital. And we were therefore kicked out because our spaza shops were really mini household kind of business, not able to...
There was no interconnectivity in trading and in building communities amongst themselves.
Yes.
Because with the Somalians, I mean, you can clearly see that one truck or one buggy delivers to, within a 3-kilometer radius, multiple stores.
We need to learn from that, the advantages of volume by way of working together. All the black spaza shops in the township must belong to the same trading organizations, and we can cut a lot of costs and get better bargaining power, even when we buy those products on the basis of bulk buying. This is the thing we have to learn from the foreigners, because they do that absolutely well. In fact, we should be saying to them, look, you can't own more than 50% of the South African business, but we must work with you to make sure that we learn the skills and we get transfer of skills so that we are able to compete against the real big white capital, which decimates all of us.
Yeah. Just last one on Dudula for you. I know it's very... I just need to say this before I move on to the question. I know it's very contentious, and I say this to the audience that this is not the first time I'm asking people about this. It's very contentious, and sometimes it's as if our citizenship is being stripped away just by the mere virtue of you blocking us from talking about it and even trying to find solutions about it. So just let's be respectful to one another, that we are allowed to agree and disagree with Dudula, because what I've noticed as well, my leader, is that anyone who speaks contrary is like the enemy. And I look at the energy and the number of people that I want to harp on anyone who says anything contrary. For me, it gets me worried sometimes. When you say, don't go to Diepsloot and just shoot. I'm not saying that's what happened implicitly. There was a context and people explained what happened. But you're not even allowed to say, don't go to a township and shoot people. Nje, out of the blue. So just your analysis of what do you think is going to happen, as you said, that there is a hand, an invisible hand of Rob Herzog. I had Nhlanhla Lux here, and he said he has seen Urop Hetzov before, he's been with him, and he wouldn't mind being captured by him. That's what he explicitly said when he was on that couch. So I'm not criticizing him. He had a moment to say what he had to say. What do you think is going to happen with Operation Dudula? Is that momentarily happening now? And maybe in 3 or 4 years' time, something new will happen?
You know, Adolf Hitler became a dominant factor in the politics of Germany as a consequence of riding on the dissatisfaction of the German people and finding an easy solution. The Jew was the problem. And you can't underestimate a movement such as Dudula, which is sustained by an anti-black sentiment in a situation of pressured black existence. Black people feel the pressure of exclusion, of the competition. I mean, white capital is creating the situation where we compete for jobs. It underpays the migrant worker, gets profits from them, and excludes the South African labor. And so South African labor feels aggrieved, but they don't, as a response, look at who creates the competition and the exclusion. We fight those that we see seem to have taken our jobs or overrepresented in the, particularly retail.
The retail sector.
Yes. But as I say, if you look at Hitler, how he came, he was able to make an excuse of the Jews. And then he got the German nation behind him. And of course, he decimated the Jews. And he did not necessarily liberate the German people.
Germans, yeah.
So right-wing movements, Dudula, in my view, is a right-wing response to the degenerate South African experience since 1994, which excludes the black person. It is a reaction to the exclusion of black people, but it is not couched in revolutionary terms so that you can see the actual problem. It is providing us an easy solution, which is based on black-on-black hatred. It is the easiest thing. I mean, we as black people, for a very long time, we socialized to hate each other. The violence, we killed 20,000 black people annually in South Africa. It is very easy to stab you or do whatever because we are oversaturated by this self-hatred. And now that self-hatred, I believe somebody like Herzog understands it and is able to mobilize it by supporting these anti-black immigrants forces, which of course are responding to a real situation. I mean, our hospitals, if you go there, there's overrepresentation of people from outside of South Africa, and that brings a lot of pressure to our situation.
And that's a day-to-day lived experience.
That's it. So you can see at work that a Zimbabwean is taking your job. You go to a hospital, you can see in the queues that a lot of Zimbabweans in your own township, perhaps people who are selling vegetables from outsiders. Your immediate lived experience tells you that this is the problem. However, we need to bring a sophisticated explanation that fighting those people is not going to solve the bigger problem, which is the creation of white capital. And white capital, by the way, is also moving into the African continent. This is the interesting thing, that destruction of the African economies, local economies, are actually instigated also by the South African white capital movement into those spaces. For instance, you have ShopRite Checkers moving.
I've seen MTN being in trouble in Nigeria and stuff like that.
Yes. So we exporting white capital, colonizing those spaces.
Is the headquarters of South Africa?
Exactly. And then we have the contradiction of fighting amongst ourselves. As I say, Cecil John Rhodes had that dream of Cape to Cairo, where white power is going to dominate. And I think they have achieved that by and large. And we needed a Pan-Africanist response to check capital in all these spaces so that we don't have this lopsided development. South Africa has a bit of development. People who of course, Zimbabwe was destroyed by white capital. They took land of white people punished them severely.
Yeah.
And also as a lesson to us, you take the land, you will suffer.
And you said it's economic terrorism or economic blackmail or something like
Yes, it is economic terrorism. Indeed. I mean, it's Zimbabwe suffering from economic terrorism by the West. And I think their biggest thing is to send a message to us in the South. Do not touch the land of white people. You will suffer.
Yeah. You're one of the few people in South Africa who, in the lead up to the 2019 elections, the ticket or the manifesto for all the political parties, particularly the EFF and the ANC, technically was land expropriation without compensation. You canvassed the country as you were campaigning as a leader of the Black First, Land First, and at every second you said, there will be no land expropriation without compensation. You foresaw that. How? How did you foresee it?
It is because ideologically the ANC and EFF move from the same basis. Even if their articulations sometimes seem like they're coming from two different points of departures.
Yeah.
But if you listen carefully to their messaging on the land question, you'll see that it goes back to the Freedom Charter. This notion that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Julius Malema went to PAL in 2015 and he told white people, the white farmers there, that EFF does not want to expropriate land which is productive.
Yeah.
It will expropriate unproductive.
Unproductive land, unused land.
Unused land. So, and then Ramaphosa's messaging is that when was big pressure for land expropriation, he said they will expropriate land, but it must not have an effect on the economy.
Yep.
So the same kind of ideas of nervousness around breaking and destroying the white system of production is inherently embedded in the thinking of people who support the Freedom Charter and South African white modernity. They don't want to think about changing the situation completely. I mean, we should be saying the first people to take land must be given land are farm workers, because they are the producers on land already. They know, I mean, I was born and raised on a farm.
Yeah.
I know, for instance, some white farmers don't even live on the farm. We as black people run those farms for them. They come occasionally to just look and, throw instructions around. Our people are already have the skills and the know-how. They just need organization to be able to produce. But this kind of thinking does not obtain within the Congress tradition or this Freedom Charter people. They really are bought into the idea of the white system, white modernity, and white order.
I'm so sorry to cut you, but do you think there was a need for them leading up to the elections for them to run on that ticket of land expropriation? Do you think that they desperately needed? I know the ANC had been continuously threatening to get below 59%. At that point, before 2019, it was getting almost 62%. It had been gradually decreasing, gradually on a decline. Was there a need for them to explicitly lie about what they were going to do just to gain votes?
Yes. There was a radicalization of politics. That's why you saw things like fees must fall, roads must fall. There was a moment in South Africa where there was radicalization of politics, which later was taken over by even Jacob Zuma. That radicalization only persisted on the rhetorical level.
Yeah.
It never translated into real material political action. Because, as we say, people who are trained, I think, ideologically by the ANC have serious self-doubt about the black project. They don't really believe black people can do it. There's a sense of, whites are right, maybe we must just... That's why, I mean, the ANC's government has just perpetuated the same apartheid logic of exclusion of black people, and they are unable to even run some of the systems that they inherited from the apartheid order. I mean, look at how the cities have gone to decay and so on. So I think there is a psychological problem that goes with a Congress tradition where there's, in a sense, the acceptance of whiteness as the answer, really.
Yeah, can you not say at the same time that perhaps there is a realization that this is going to end soon in terms of their leadership, the ANC, and therefore whoever gets a turn just to run it down the ground, so that at some point, because I do believe that, as we were seeing since 2004, that okay, they are on 67%, then 2009, okay, 63%, and then 2014 and 2019, you see now it's like less than 59%. So is there no realization from the current leadership in the ANC that perhaps whoever gets a turn to lead, let's just mess it up before we lose our turn to lead outright?
Well, there is a sense of, I suppose, a looting and running. They're out of the door, so they will just loot and finish.
I'm sure leaders like Mobutu had those ideas as well, as they saw the empire is crumbling. Let me take as much as I can and then leave Zaire.
That's true. But you see, the president of the country, it's a proper mafia. His whole operations are based precisely on taking from the people and using the language of democracy, of fighting corruption and all that, whilst he's amassing a lot of wealth. We know that he's running this farm, money is being stolen, and then like a proper mafia, he goes, catches people, terrorizes them, give them money to shut them up. He's running a parallel state, a parallel criminal state. And this is the president of the country who, by the way, you must remember, he got into that position on the basis of R1 billion given by white capital to buy that ANC Nazareth conference. That is not speculation.
Yeah.
It's a given fact that white capital gave him R1 billion towards that conference. So white people, in a sense, I think they put a bet in the sense that either they capture the ANC at a time through that money, or if Ramaphosa did not emerge, they would have created a political party which together with Ramaphosa political party, if it did not emerge, which will then work with the DA and they will reach a majority. Now, the same is going to happen. The ANC will dip below 50%.
Yeah, obviously.
And that what we called at the time 2019 project, which was concocted around the coalition government, will in the coming election become a reality. And we can have a white president. There's a real possibility of having a white president.
If we are to believe that there will be there's no political party that's going to win more votes than the ANC. It's simply a matter of ANC dipping below 50% and the other political parties finding a way to working together to get the outright majority. And in that outright majority from a coalition government, the DA arguably will get between 20 and 30%, which will be the biggest percentage. And someone from the DA is probably most likely going to emerge. It's a fucking nightmare, actually.
It is. But they've already experimented this. All our strategic metros are run by the DA. It is already a fact. So they will simply bring into national politics and they whatever the guy is. Yes, he'll become the president of the country. We're laughing about it now, but it's a real possibility. Julius Malema will give white people political power to spite the ANC, I suppose. But it is part of realizing the right-wing shift since 1994 in our politics. There's been a serious right-wing shift in terms of a political development of how the state itself is managed in the interest of whiteness. Even as it speaks about black people, all it gave us is RDP houses. That's the best they have done thus far.
And the social grants.
And the social grants to keep us breathing.
Yeah, at the very least, you just breathe. Can we critique Cyril Ramaphosa? I say to a lot of people that it's not as if he didn't know that in 2012, when people were killed in Marikana, that he was not implicated one way or the other. The time he ascends to presidency, into power in the ANC in 2017, you were fully aware of who he was and what role he played in the killing of or the massacre of 42 people in Marikana. He appeared in the commission, and I think he was inclined or made to apologize eventually after a very long time of not acknowledging his role there. So whoever he is, we already knew what he was way before he ascended to power in the ANC. The public protector has been suspended by Cyril Ramaphosa. The public protector was obviously preparing to call Cyril Ramaphosa to order over what is happening in his farm. Just talk through everything that has happened regarding Ramaphosa, particularly from the farm, and whether or not he needs to be impeached, and whether or not he will step aside. What are the implications of everything that's happening now, and why is he suspending the public protector?
Yeah, you see, it is true that Ramaphosa was highly implicated in the Marikana massacre. And I mean, that alone should have excluded him from any kind of political, You
want to preside over us, but...
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that he called the police to murder workers. And that's what happened. I mean, the ANC, to then elect a man like that to become president, it was the beginning of the end, in a sense. Because morally, it shows that the ANC has lost it. It's a rotten to the core. It gave this man the power to become president of the nation. And we can see how the state, he has created the state into a criminal organization. And that is why whoever asks questions and has got possibility to hold him to account is quickly dealt with. I mean, John Tlhophe, for instance, that judge is one of the clearest.
Western Cape High Court judge, or the president of the Western Cape High Court.
Yes. I mean, he has been criminalized. The Mugweng also towards the end, he was criminalized. The public protector is also criminalized. And this public protector's biggest sin, by the way, is to find against white capital. She said Absa must pay back the money it stole under apartheid. And she was being vilified for that. She said that the Reserve Bank must be transformed to make sure that its monetary policies are beneficial to our people. And that gave white capital a big fright. And she's being punished for that, including her finding against the CR17 funding, that she found that there was indeed corruption there. And so Ramaphosa is clearing the state of any possible voices that can hold his government to account. And therefore he has created a hegemonic force which is able to serve his interests and the interests of white capital. By the way, his interests and the interests of white capital are the same.
Absolutely.
And so you will see even this farm situation is going to disappear. He will get the slap, on the wrist.
I saw white media, and I suppose white media by extension uses us to work as journalists, as black faces. I saw them panicking a lot. It's as if they could have well said in most of their headlines, how are we going to spin this?
Yeah,
they really was scrambling. Yes. Like he put them in a very bad position.
Yes, they are increasingly getting a bit of confidence to throw things around, but they are in a very bad position because Ramaphosa's blatant criminality is very difficult to defend. Let's think about it. This guy literally sent police to go capture people, bring them back to the farm, tortures them, and then he pays them to keep them quiet. This is a mafia style of operation. So that is your president. And the South African white media, which his interests are best served by him, is doing everything to try to protect him. I don't know whether they can sustain it. I suppose the problem is the radical economic transformation faction is not sufficiently organized. It is not ideologically coherent and strategically competent to even take advantage of this serious flaw and opportunity for a serious move. By now, there should have been very clear calls for Ramaphosa to resign. And coming from within the leadership of the ANC, of those who claim to stand for radical economic transformation. But those voices are in cohort, they are not coordinated, and as a result, Ramaphosa is going to get scot-free again.
Yeah, I think the step aside really hampers. It's a very good strategic move from his end, even though it somehow always opens up the possibility for him to dig his own grave in there. But I think, as you say, that there's no clear voice within the leadership structures of the ANC to say anything, because I'm trying to work out why are they quiet. It could be that anytime you say something, as we are seeing now, that something against you, you will be charged by someone. Something is going to happen and you will be forced to step aside. I saw Mgxitama recently saying that, I think he was maybe throwing his name in the hat, Uguti is not going to step aside regardless, and perhaps he now is going to emerge as the natural opponent to Ramaphosa, because I've been scrambling to look at who else in the ANC. I mean, Zweli Mkhize said something, but I genuinely just did not believe that it's going to be him, because it doesn't appear to have a support base. What do you make of the lack of opponents against Ramaphosa in the ANC, and do you believe Mgxitama could launch an opposing campaign against Ramaphosa?
Ace is possibly the best figure in the radical economic transformation circles. But I think, firstly, we must recognize and appreciate the decisiveness of Ramaphosa.
Absolutely.
You know, this man knows how to use power. He is unapologetic. He just moves and does what is required to sustain the interests of white capital. And I think President Zuma must be sitting there and kicking himself when he sees that Ramaphosa is able to use the state decisively to chop people off, to arrest people, throw them in jail, to silence them, to remove them from positions of influence. I think that is a great lesson of how you use power. You have to be decisive. I mean, that is why I respect Gayton Mackenzie so much. He's one of the few individuals who knows how to use power. He's very decisive. And that's what the left needs. When the left has the capacity to, or has access to leverages of power, we always hesitate. We listen too much to the right wing.
We want to play democracy.
We want to play democracy instead of playing ideological clarity and decisiveness. We are not going to change this country through playing these games that we have played thus far. We must learn from the right wing and learn from white people as well. You know, white people, one of the things we must learn, how they took political power, excluded us, created a fake majority, and then went to parliament and make laws, take the land of black people, put them into township, put them into homelands. They were making those laws.
And in our history, they've never been more than 10% of the population.
Yeah, of course. They created a fake majority. We are a numerical majority.
Yeah.
So we should not be even debating anything. On the key questions, all black people should say, simply saying we must do those things. But the problem is we do not have a cohesive ideological orientation. That's where we as black people are defeated. We do not have a black agenda, which we, even if we disagree on everything, but on the black agenda, we need to agree. And if we have any chance to overcome these problems, we have to work on that black agenda.
How does ACE then navigate step-aside rule if that is an ANC policy within that you're not going to be eligible to run? Because you could say whatever you want to say in public. If we go to conference and you need your you need your validation for you to be standing against Cyril Ramaphosa, the people who are going to be the vanguards against that are going to say, hey, we don't have your name on the list because you don't qualify to be on the list anyways. So he could be making public statements, but how does it circumvent, how does it get to the ballot in the first place?
Well, he must be hoping that these problems of Cyril Ramaphosa creates the possibility for some kind of renegotiation of the process, because if Ramaphosa is charged, for instance, then he himself is out of the running. This is what the Radical Economic Transformation faction is hoping for, that he must get charged. Once that happens, then he's out. And I think at that point, there will be a renegotiation of the rules to allow more people to come in, and this is how ACE will...
There will be no candidates at some point. At some point, there will be no candidates.
Yes.
Yeah, it's crazy though, because I'm trying to work out who's going to charge Ramaphosa. Like, we eliminated Obusiwe Mkhwebane from the picture. Is Shamila Patoi the next logical one who's going to charge Ramaphosa now? Like, where should we expect as a country the charge? Because I think there's criminality that happened in that farm, whether you like Ramaphosa or not. If you use your logic and you follow the money and you follow the story, there is, I mean, even the president yesterday in Namibia, they were asking him questions about that, because I think there were Namibian nationals who had to, like, they were kidnapped in Namibia, taken back to South Africa to answer for that, and they were accusing the Namibians are accusing the Namibian president, you facilitated the kidnapping of our citizens and being extradited illegally back to South Africa to go and answer, and the police didn't know anything about it, you know. So Shamila Batohi, should we expect anything from her? What's her political leaning? Because I don't know, if Busiwe Mkhwebane is out of the picture, who is going to charge Ramaphosa?
It is true that the president, in terms of the state system, he has almost hegemony. I suppose they will have to look at things like private prosecution as well, to take the matter directly to court, because then in an open court, I suppose he's going to have to answer to those charges. So there's that avenue open as well. But would it mean the ANC, if we take him directly to court in private prosecution, would that be read as he is charged and therefore he must not stand? That's where I suppose the big question is going to emerge from. Should the process wait until the court decides to find him guilty or not? I don't know. So Ramaphosa is in a very strong position, and he has already shown us that he doesn't care for rules, and so he's going to arm wrestle his way into that conference and kick out all these rivals, and he'll emerge as president. That is the most likely possibility. Of course, they will bring some more money. Those provinces that seem to be reluctant on him, they will be bought, and he will become the next president again.
Yeah. Was Ace always the natural face of the RT faction? Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma was the natural, and you could see there was a strong contest there in 2017. You could see, okay, we can see it's this one versus this one, and they look like they have support, but of course money is going to be the determining factor, as it happens with many elections. Was Ace, because I'm looking at Ace and I'm thinking he's just only emerging now. I know he's always been a leader, he always had free state, but leading up to these elections internally of the ANC in December, was Ace going to be the face naturally, or was it going to be the continuation of Nkosazana perhaps running for the second time against Ramaphosa?
I would say Nkosazana would have been that candidate. Ace emerges in the context of no other clear, face that can represent that agenda. And as things stands, he stands out more than most of them, even Lindiwe Sisulu, some people are opposing her and so on.
She always looks like an independent. You never really know where she stands.
Yes. She may become a compromise candidate in the event that the balance of forces is such that none of the two factions, the Ramaphosa or the ACE, is clearly emerging. Somebody might go with her to just tip the scales. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think that Ramaphosa will contest ACE.
All right. Let's move then from the ANC. I have the luxury of time to speak to you. I just need to mention that as well. I've never had the luxury of time to talk to you. I've been a supporter from afar. But yes, let's move away from the ANC a little bit. I want to agitate you by saying that I don't foresee a time and space and place in the world where capitalism relinquishes its power. Capitalism, white supremacy, white monopoly capital, however you frame it. I don't envision, not necessarily that it's not in my heart that I would like it to be defeated, but I don't foresee a world where capitalism relinquishes its power. Of course, not voluntarily, but even in combat, whatever form of combat, capitalism will always prosper. In fact, it entrenches its power as time goes on. Whereas maybe 50 years ago, it had one grip. Now, it is firmly in control with both grips and maybe other hands as well in power globally, except where you could mention perhaps China and maybe Russia. I don't know what's happening with some of the South American states. I think there is a left-leaning state there, whether it's Venezuela or I just forgot now, but there is a couple of them that are not really under the control or the hegemony of the white superstructure, white supremacy or white monopoly capital. Do you believe that in the next 200 years we could ever see a world where brown people all over the world are the rulers of their own lands and they are masters of their own industries?
Yeah, I mean, Frantz Fanon says that we need to imagine the end of the world. For, in a sense, black people to be truly liberated. And that's a big proposition. The capitalist order is a very entrenched order. It is naturalized itself. But it is a very crisis-driven system. I mean, in 2007, we remember the crash of the capitalist system, which brought the state. The state was brought to basically cover the whole, and again,
it had to bail out the financial
crisis.
Yes.
Again, you see, every 10 years, the state must come out and bail out capital. I think we are again in the same situation where inflation is going to go crazy, people losing their jobs, and the whole system basically faltering. Mm-hmm. It will be money from the people that is brought to keep capitalism alive from its deathbed. So capitalism is kept alive in a sense by its agents. But I don't think that it is insurmountable to really get rid of the capitalist system. The examples of Latin America you talk about now, Venezuela, Ecuador, even Mexico, Cuba is still standing there.
Oh yeah, it's our beacon of hope. Even though they are imposing sanctions and shit like that, they're like, fuck you.
Yes, I mean, Cuba give us the hope. China is an interesting one because whilst it is capitalist, it is not the Western type of capitalism.
Yes.
It's a state
and I'm so sorry. I was about to argue that it's not even communism as well. It's sort of like a hybrid system where they impose their own beliefs within the framework of capitalism. If I'm characterizing it correct.
That's right. So the Chinese got one thing right, where the state determines the pace and the direction of capitalist accumulation.
Yeah.
And And I mean, that is an easy way to solve most of your problems, where the state dictates to capital. I mean, Jack Ma, for instance. You see, in China, if you try to play bigger than the state quickly cuts you down. And Chinese have been able to get out of poverty as a result of a framework which provides a national direction of development, and capital is then coerced into operating within a national vision. So I think China provides a very good example of how we can work with the capitalist system by making it subservient to the project of national development. Maybe that is your best hope in the medium term, whilst you work towards undermining capital accumulation in the long run.
I think what the reason why I get to this point, sorry, is that I'm 32 years old and I'm observing my country through democracy, and I realize that every time a promising bunch of politicians emerges, the capitalists will find a way to buy them off to a point where they sing their own tune. Even within the Fizz Must Fall movement, there are celebrities within that. If you're a poet, you are then co-opted to do poetry in advertisements as opposed to be a radical poet. I'm just doing a cultural critique as I look through our people, and I'm like, these niggas will always be ahead because we will always need. Tina, we will always have appetites that will need to be fulfilled. And the capitalists will always be there to say, you know what, instead of losing an industry worth trillions, let me use 5 million to satisfy this one and use this one or this bunch as our leaders to cause distraction. That's why they are mostly ahead most of the time. And then, of course, they invent social medias that has our information. They track what we say on the phones. They know ahead of time what mischievous bullshit we are planning against them. On top of the fact that amongst us, as we are planning, they have their own agents as well. So I'm looking at it from many angles to say it's almost impossible that we will get to a point where we are burning capitalism down.
Well, I mean, it will be a life of a complete nightmare if we're to imagine that we can't change society towards a society that puts the interests of people first instead of profits.
Yeah.
Now, capitalism has won. I mean, up to now, when there were examples of leaders in Africa, for instance, take Thomas Sankara, who was a great example of what you can do with the state to serve the people. He was murdered. All these people, I mean, in the Congo, Lumumba, here in Mozambique, they killed Samora. In South Africa, they killed, even before they got into power, people like Biko. And so capitalism, in a sense, is indeed streets ahead. But it is also a vulnerable system. You just need a layer of people that says, yeah, basta, no more. And the system retreats. The examples that we make today, Venezuela is a good example, where they put up a big fight through Hugo Chavez initially. And his example of a state that serves the people is being entrenched. Of course, it's a big struggle. There are big reversals. But there is attempts to put the people first. In a sense, we have to keep on preaching the hope for change. We cannot give up the hope that society can be transformed to serve the interests of all.
Yeah. It feels like if you pursue that, you are pursuing a noble cause. Also, on the same coin, you could be wasting a lifetime. But then if you don't pursue it, you are also wasting a lifetime. It is a
thankless...
Yeah.
I mean, I've wasted a lot of my life already.
Yeah.
I mean...
And the first people to oppose you are the same people that you're trying to help.
Yes. I mean... so sometimes I do question myself. I should have become a big lawyer, or I should be teaching at the university. I should be writing my books instead of trying to organize a revolutionary movement. I should have a very comfortable life as a consequence. And in fact, I was being recruited even by Thabo Mbeki to work in the state system. If I put my self-interest first. But I do believe that there must always be a layer in any generation that is sacrificed for the possibility of change. Another time, that layer will succeed. It has to succeed. We have to keep the hope alive.
Yeah.
I can't just believe that this is it. I can't believe this is the end of history.
Absolutely.
I can't believe this is life, a life of suffering in the midst of plenty. This is the thing. We have the means to make life good for everyone. But the minority, evil minority, has kept to itself all the goods that God has given us. And we are struggling to simply wrest power from them and distribute these goods for the good of all. The revolutionary project is a very simple proposition, quite frankly. It is a question of everybody has housing, has good health care, has education, has drinking clean water. I mean, what more? This is what life is about. And the revolution has to answer those simple questions. And a minority has decided that it will take all the wealth and the majority will suffer. And I don't think that's an ethical way of being. And when we get born, we must commit to transform society.
Yeah, very compelling points there. I don't want to push back a lot. I wanted your point of view as I proposed that, Uguti, this is going to be a system that always wins, but you can't, unfortunately, you can't reduce yourself to accepting that because you're going to die inside slowly. And maybe you might have a heart attack within a year or two.
It is a nightmare to believe, to accept that this is it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a total nightmare to think that we live, and this is going to be the permanent state of humanity, that a minority perpetuates its power over a majority that suffers when we have enough for everyone to live well. I mean, for me, it's very hard to accept that status quo.
Yeah, I've worked it out too, and it's reached that point that, okay, this is what's going to happen, but you can't just accept it. Slavoj Žižek was writing for a lot of publications. To anyone who doesn't know, Slavoj Žižek is a Slovenian philosopher, activist, and so on and so forth. Check his videos out on YouTube. He was a darling of media when he was speaking one way, and when he spoke slightly in favor of Donald Trump, but in a nuanced way, he was trying to make a point about people and why they lean towards certain people, but we don't have time to unpack his statements. He started losing his gigs. I started consuming you when I was 18, 19, 20, 2008, 2009, 2010, through articles, Times Live, Mail and Guardian. The minute that you spoke different languages as an independent human being, as you are, those started dwindling. You never lost your ability to write. You still have a sharp pen, but you lost those jobs. They stopped coming. Let's take us through your journey in South African media, and what do you think they wanted you to say? What were you useful for to them that you were no longer useful at some point as you started saying other things?
Yeah, man, I was a superstar, amazing superstar.
Yes, you were.
I mean, I was writing for all of them.
Yes.
And they were paying me good money. I mean, the Sowetan alone, I mean, I had a gig of 2 columns a month. They were paying me about 12,000 rand back then.
So you're literally writing 2 times a month?
Yes, and about 600 words. I mean, wow. Which I can do over an hour. Really.
Yeah.
And I wrote, Mail and Guardian paid me good money. I was one of the well-paid columnists for the Mail and Guardian contributors. City Press paid me. So I wrote for everyone. You see, my emphasis at the time was an attack on the ANC.
Oh, yes.
And I was therefore useful. Even my radical critique of the ANC, even if it was clear that I was saying the ANC is not pushing the black agenda, my emphasis was on the ANC, and therefore I was allowed to attack. But when I started saying the ANC is a servant of white capital, and my message was becoming sharper and sharper towards that, I lost my relevance in the eyes of white capital. Mm-hmm. or the owners of those publication. And of course, when I joined the EFF at the time, at the beginning, we're radical. I believe that we're going to make this revolution. I lost. They will not even take my articles for free. And then, of course, we got hardened black consciousness positions in BLF that basically criminalized my voice.
Yep.
And of course, we did do another thing, another scene, where we defended the Guptas.
Oh, yes. We'll get to that.
Yes, when we did that, all my gig stops. I mean, universities used to invite me.
I used to read your lectures at university.
Yes.
That means someone would have transcribed. I don't know how I would get them.
Yes.
But you would speak for 2 hours, and Mina in Nyanga, Cape Town, I would download in a tiny phone, and I would read and it would feel like I'm listening to you for 2 hours because you were such a superstar speaker, writer, and they would invite you in all of these universities.
Yes, I mean, that's my alma mater where I studied. Twice the student invited me. Twice the university stopped me from going to speak at Wits. So I'm in a sense a bent voice on the main campuses in this country. It is because of the message that we trying to push. Of course, it is the Guptas and Zuma. We came out and support the most hated forces in the country. And I know, I mean, there's a young intellectual, white guy who's got a lot of influence in the university systems. He used to invite me all over. Since I moved with Zuma, he has attacked me as an agent and corrupt and all that goes with that. So I'm very tainted as it is now. No one can want to come close to me.
Yeah, I mean, even when you are on TV campaigning for the elections, just the way that they make you appear, there's like you're a deranged man.
Yes.
The way that they ask you questions just to piss you off. It's like sometimes you have the hair, you have the beard for it. Before you were sick, obviously, and you were thinner and you had very high energy. So they knew like all they need to do is to agitate you, and then you would go in and you look like a deranged man, But I knew that 10 years prior to that moment, I used to read someone who was everywhere in all of the newspapers. Maybe what does that say about our media then? Our media being the function of capital and capitalism, or being the function of whoever is the ruling party?
Yeah, I mean, Karl Marx makes this point that the dominant ideas in any society are the ideas of the ruling class. And the media is part of the ideation project. So the ruling class will allow, for instance, the Sowetan, even under apartheid, Sowetan used to be allowed to make critical moves, just enough to get people.
Was it run by blacks at the time?
Yes, yes. Okay. Yes, but still owned by white capital. They let black people run with it. A lot of the black consciousness writers, Sabu, Mazwai, Matata Tsedu, a few others were in the Sowetan, and they were writing radical stuff. The white system allows you a little bit of a breather, in a sense. To also justify its existence.
Yeah.
So that's what happened with me, man. I was allowed to so long as I was attacking the ANC, I was okay. But once I started raising the issue sharply of white capital as the main contradiction, and the ANC as being the bodyguard of white capital, my social capital in the eyes of white power also diminished.
Yeah. In 2012, I read an obscure website that interviewed you, and you said the economic freedom fighters, it was 2012-2013, right at the beginning of the EFF. In your justification for joining them, you said the economic freedom fighters have decimated the space for the left. they speak your language. Therefore, there's absolutely nothing you can do because they have become the radical leftist voice, and therefore you join it to influence its policies. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but I know that you specifically said they decimated the space for the left to operate in. What was that your motivation to say, look, I'm always going to be on the peripheral. Maybe I'm going to appeal to 100,000 people, but here is a vehicle that appeals to at least 2-3 million South Africans. Maybe let me join there and have influence ideologically.
Yes, Julius made very interesting ideological moves. Initially, he was just saying nationalization when he was the youth league leader. And we attacked
president.
him, part of Blackwash and SNI. We said, yeah, I mean, nationalization is a project of realization of black capital, because you nationalize so that you can have state capitalism, which is controlled by politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Then he said land expropriation without compensation, because initially they were talking about compensation.
Mm-hmm.
That move is the one that really turned us ideologically to say, now there's no longer any difference on the land question.
Sure.
They are not talking freedom charter, they're talking land expropriation without compensation.
You're speaking your language.
This is our language. And we also understood that a lot of the impatient, potentially revolutionary youth were attracted to his messaging. We said, okay, let's go in with him. We still do not trust him.
Mm. Yeah, I'm curious. SNI is September National Imbizo,
Yes.
right? I'm curious where you guys literally in debates about joining the EFF and whether sharp voices against such a move.
Yes, we wrote even position papers.
Mm-hmm.
We had a whole conference. We looked at the many options. Incidentally, already in 2010, I was raising the possibility of joining Julius. I was saying,
Mm-hmm.
if this man is attacked by the ANC and he goes independent, we might join him to strengthen that independent possibility.
Mm-hmm. Is it at this point, I can't remember the exact year, whether 2010 was the time he was expelled or he was about to be expelled?
Yes, around there was that happening. So I was beginning to think that a force that is on the left of the ANC, for whatever reasons, it's a good possibility. So when, as we say, he started the EFF and he said that, we debated seriously. I mean, there were dissenting voices.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people say they don't trust him, he's a comprador. They were making all this kind of moralistic criticism. And some of those, myself included, were saying, well, we need to see if he can provide a momentum of a revolutionary possibility. We believe once we ignite that momentum, he will not be able to hold it. And so we will go in there and bring a revolutionary content into what was doing. That is why when we joined, I immediately started working on the policies of the EFF.
Yeah.
The founding manifesto. We brought in things there like the Sankara Oath,
Sankara Oath, yeah.
which of course they've kicked out now.
The Sankara Oath, just briefly for the people who are watching, is literally a clause or an obligation for all public servants to use public hospitals, to use public transportation system, so that they ensure that they are ran top class. If the president is forced to use a public hospital, it will mean that it will always be high class for all of us. That's the Sankara Oath, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Thomas Sankara had shown us through his example that the state can be used to serve the people instead of serving the political class. So we have to argue that this is an oath for Sankara to say that those who are elected into political office will use the services they give the people.
Absolutely.
If it is good for the people, then it must be good for them. And precisely that was the logic, that once Ramaphosa imagines himself going to Bara, we'll make sure that Baragwanath works And then everybody benefit as a consequence.
They would probably install a VIP section.
The people were raising those issues, but we're saying once we implement that policy, you'll bring consciousness also to the people that why are we doing this? We're doing this so that everybody gets the same treatment, and once they get the same treatment, the quality of services would then improve.
So the cardinal pillars in the EFF, you had a hand in almost all of them.
We gave content to that whole thing. I work very closely with Floyd Shivambu, who's a very hard worker. And we had a very good rapport. We churn out documents. And
you're working with people from the ANC.
Absolutely. And if let me tell you something about Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. I actually recruited that guy to the EFF.
Where was he at that point?
He was with the ANC Youth League.
Oh.
And he knew them from there, and they had messed him up at Wits. He really was very reluctant. I used to tell him, look, let's go in there. The youth is going there. The revolutionary youth is going there. And then finally, they approached him, and he then agreed. So yes, for me, it was the EFF's development. It was the biggest post-94 revolutionary possibility.
Yeah. I agree on that.
And even now, the youth that is impatient, that want change, that want struggle is there. However, the leadership is beholden to the status quo, but very, very articulate in projecting a radical rhetoric, which is a thing which is going to hold the revolution for much longer, because a lot of people who have a revolutionary instinct naturally gravitates towards that big voice.
Yeah, because even at a varsity level, I think they always win the majority of the campuses or something like that.
Yes, I mean, they've done very well with the university students. A lot of university students who want change, who are disgruntled, then they'll go to the EFF. So the system is clever. It reproduces itself by creating alternatives which will do exactly the same thing that which you are against at certain points. So they give you false solutions to your problems. What
was the main motivation for you turning down a position in the elective conference when you said your revolutionary consciousness would not allow you to accept a position, I think we would say, in the executive of the EFF?
Yeah. Already at the time, it was clear that this whole thing is going right wing, but also the way the whole conference was conducted, it was like a choir, man. Mm-hmm. Julius was sitting right in front, wearing a white shirt, and conducting how people should vote. So there was no democratic process. It was all stage managed, and I saw some of the key, really principled leaders falling. And I knew that there was no longer any future for me in the EFF. So I declined all the positions. And immediately thereafter, indeed, they went to PAL to go talk to the white farmers. That's why Julius gave them the guarantee that EFF doesn't want to expropriate the productive land. It wants the unproductive land. And then they also met with representatives of global capital. Mm. And again, there some other deals were cut. And then they went, of course, to London. I mean, it was a very clear, managed right-wing project with radical Marxist-Leninist talk. But it has brought us here where they have no qualms to work with the DA, a party of white capital, a party of racist extremists. That show you that there's a big disjuncture between the black talk and the white walk.
Yeah, what happened to... I'll revisit what you just said now. What happened to the block of September National Mbizo? As you guys phasing yourselves out, were you one of the few people I know, Puraja, Mgxitama, and a lot of your comrades as well, left. But are there some of them remaining in leadership positions? We EFF. Did you caucus again and say, guys, we need to get the hell out of here because this is not the project that we signed up for?
Yeah, we had this very painful. It was a very traumatic time. It was because, also for me, a lot of people had said I will not be able to work with Julius, and I wanted to prove them wrong. And by the way, Julius is a very good listener, actually. When we worked together, we worked very well. It was exceptional, collegial, respectful, mutually engaged process. It was a really productive process. And he's very, very smart. That chap is smart. Make no mistake about it. He assimilates ideas quickly. Once you make a proposal, he's able to operationalize it, understand where it is going. I mean, for instance, we introduced Thomas Sankara, and he listened, and he was able to articulate the positions of Thomas Sankara even better than us.
Yeah.
So
he's an orator. He's got a beautiful gift of speaking. He intoxicates even myself, particularly in my early 20s. And then, of course, you grow and you realize, okay, all politicians are the same. But to that point, though, he's a beautiful orator. He's very intoxicating, and 2 million people could listen to him, and they could be convinced to go and do something immediately.
Yeah, no, he's one of our gifted politicians. Unfortunately, he's just a politician. And I was hoping we can seduce him towards a revolutionary possibility. And I mean, that was my own kind of, I suppose, self-indulgent imagination that we can seduce him towards thinking about being Thomas
from
Sankara.
Outside looking in, you would not have known that it's not possible to sway him that way. So without knowing him in advance, you would not have known whether you were just imagining this and it's impossible to do it. You had to go first, try it, before you know, it was maybe impossible to do it in the first place.
We have always had question because we knew him. I mean, we already criticized him. By the way, before he started EFF, he had already broken that house in Sandton of 3 million rand and built a 20 million rand house. He was already involved in serious corruption in Limpopo, so the signs were there. But, hope against hope. And I said, and again, politics is the art of the possible. You go into a space, introduce a dynamic. You really don't know how that dynamic will pan out.
Absolutely.
So we were hoping to introduce a revolutionary dynamic. As you say, once we work on the policy direction of the movement, putting Sankara oath in there, you locked in the movement into a revolutionary direction. So we were hoping that you can then make sure that membership internalizes the ideological direction of the movement, and therefore the leadership will find it difficult to sell out. So, I mean, that was our thinking, wishful thinking, I suppose. But yeah.
The original question was about the SNI blog.
Yeah.
And whether or not some of them are still remaining in the leadership position.
No, yes,
and what was the conversation like as you departed the EFF? Was the persuasion amongst all of you?
The majority of us were clear that we're going to, I mean, you must have seen in that conference, I actually cried.
Yes, I watched that.
A lot of our people were crying with me, and it was like a big funeral because our dream of engendering a revolutionary possibility in the EFF had died. A few comrades stayed, and some of them are in parliament. We have no interaction with them whatsoever because I know Julius. If he sees any kind of friendly relations with us, they would have been chopped off. I was very influential in the vets student movement. I stopped talking to them at all because I knew that if they were seen with me or whatever, they would have been chopped off. And some actually were chopped off as a result of their continued association with me. Julius is running a very clear project there. There's no space for any kind of questioning. So yeah, we went in, we were smashed. We then converged in the Black First Land First movement.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Black First Land First movement. Julius Malema speaking to Cyril Ramaphosa. I have a very sharp memory. When I listen to something, I pay attention to it. I didn't note any of these things down, but when he was speaking to Cyril Ramaphosa, I will paraphrase, he insinuated that your BLF project was an ANC-funded, Zuma faction-funded project. How do you respond to that? Did you hear him say that? Because he did say that you were a project specifically funded by the Zuma. And at the time, of course, what people were visibly seeing was you going to support Jacob Zuma every time there was a court case and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I heard that some people were, told me that. Well, there's no truth to that at all. We are an independent, organically emerged movement. When we got out of the EFF, we asked the question, what must happen? And we had serious debates amongst ourselves. I personally was very reluctant to start a political movement, but comrades in the were within the SNI were very clear that we have to start all over again. As Lenin says, you get smashed, you pick yourself up, smashed again, start all over again and again, just like You're
quoting Lenin. Let me bring it closer to modern times. To Kwaito, as Mendoza said, indoda namhlanje kusasiphinde ivuke.
Exactly. So we have to keep the dream alive. And at the time we also believed, we analyzed the Black consciousness existing movements, and there was an option. Should we join Azapo, for instance? Our view was that we couldn't go to Azapo because we were raising a critique about two things there. One, the association with the ANC ruling party, because their president was a minister in the Mbeki administration, and then also they have accepted white membership. So we had ideological.
And I think that was your beef as well with PAC.
Yes.
They also accept white members.
Yes, and also the internecine kind of battles within the PAC were very troubling for us.
Sure, the PAC, my daughter, has been embroiled in battles for almost all of my existence. I'm born in 1990. Ever since I opened my eyes, maybe when I was 10, noticing things, what are politics, it's like there's always some grappling with leadership and people taking each other to court.
Yeah.
And I was always asking myself, shouldn't this be a vehicle for us as Africans? But they're continuously embroiled in leadership.
It has gone a little bit better in the past few years under Mzwanele. There seemed to be some kind of order that is coming into the PAC. Let's see how long that is sustained. But as I say, at a time we debated these options, and then we said no. We have to start a new political movement, and Black First Land First was born.
Yeah, but why does Julius Malema says you are funded by Jacob Zuma?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I got out of hospital, I was told that he had said that. And I actually thought about suing him, because apparently he said that I got money from Jacob Zuma through the Secret Service, something like that.
Yes, it was, because I was listening to that interview.
Yes.
It was something along those lines.
Yeah, which is a total lie, of course. We support Jacob Zuma ideologically. And I mean, that is why we support Jacob Zuma. We stood with the Guptas. From an ideological point of view, our argument is simply this. What is the main contradiction in South Africa? The main contradiction is the battle against white capital. Who are those who are opposed to white capital? The Guptas and Zuma were opposed to white capital. Therefore, tactically, they become our allies in the battle. I mean,
an enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Of course, this is what Mao Zedong teaches us, that the enemy of your enemy is your friend.
Yeah.
And
can I ask you something, my leader? And I ask this respectfully. Do you not waver from positions as a result of reading the room from your followers? If you are BLF and trying to build something with the intention of it being a political movement that can be sustainable and winning some votes and percentages. If the room is saying, yo, imakancinci ngozuma, or yo, imakancinci ngaba Gupta aba, are you not rigid in your position? I ask this with respect, Oguti. Perhaps the majority of the people that follow us don't want us to talk about this. And I will get to Bushiri as well, because I think it's interlinked as well, that there are these people that your followers would rather not hear. It's like their following is on the condition that, don't talk to us about Zuma. Let the ANC stand up for Zuma, because that's a different party altogether. Let the Indians fight for the Guptas, because that's their nationals, if they are Indian nationals. Let the congregants of Bushiri fight for him. But Tina can be built here as the BLF without having to hear about those people.
Yes. That's a very neat, clean positioning. We will not dirty ourselves with the affairs of others. Mm. But in the revolutionary situation, we are going to have to dirty our hands, because we're always trying to tip the scales in our favor. We can be very purist, a small, uninfluential proposition.
Yeah.
Or we can try to align with those that, with some kind of minimum agreements with. If we are convinced that white capitalists are taking you, it is our duty to defend you, because in our heads there's the primary contradiction, and whatever comes from the primary contradiction dictates how we respond.
Are you not hamstringing yourself in the process of building? So having built a few businesses myself, I know the goal is like, okay, I could be embroiled in focusing on anything else other than building this brand, so that in 2 years' time, we are making 5 million per year at a small scale, or maybe 50 million per year. So my mindset is literally just, let me just do this. So as a BLF, before your first election, you are canvassing, you are trying to gain popularity amongst your followers, which you have arguably between 50 and 100,000 sympathizers. In outright numbers, sympathizers, potential people that could vote for you. If half of them are saying, can you stop talking about this topic as we are leading up to the elections, and you are continuously talking about it, you are continuously supporting it, you are continuously using your resources to go to support Umsholozi, whereas in-house, your potential pool of people that could support you to get 2 seats in parliament are saying, don't do this. Can you not see, Uguti, you are perhaps derailing, or you are hamstringing yourself? That was the original word I used. Hamstringing yourself, that you are on this ideological point, you are steadfast, that you are not going to change. But what it means is that between 50 and 100,000 people are not going to vote for you as a result of that.
Well, I mean, that is a calculation that you make. The other aspect of it is that if you look at the following of Bushiri and the following of Zuma, it's also quite substantial. So you are making calculations about the possibility of actually attracting those into your cause. And the fact that did not translate into numbers like that, it does mean, of course, you undercut your natural base.
Yep. Because you did have a strong base. You yourself as Andile Mngxitama are such a charismatic leader that if obviously social media was not trying to attack you, you would probably have 100,000 people easily voting for you. If social media was not trying to block you on Twitter, let you spread your voice freely, just like you are doing on Facebook, you could easily have 100,000 people vote for you, which is sufficient to give you 3, 4 seats, just on the strength of your personality and black people buying into your message. Just on that. But the condition being then, even with those people, they would see and hear you talk Zuma, and they'll be like, nah, not Zuma. Because
but let us look at the support base of Zuma and also Bushiri. It is really substantial. The question is, why did they not support us?
Because my pushback is that they are using you. Then they are more than happy for you to post. I remember when you were posting about Bushiri, because like I said, I always follow you. When you were posting about Bushiri, I don't know, are they ECG?
Yeah.
The ECG congregants would always be on your comment section, giving you support and attacking anyone who is a contrary or someone who's trying to highlight to you, Mr. Mngxi, we are sorry, we don't want you to talk about Bushiri, you know. And they were always there as a strong base digitally. But when it's vote time, it doesn't translate to them supporting you. Yeah, but when they have a closure or there's a threat to close their church, you are there physically with your resources to go and support them, but they don't give you that in return, you know. And that's a calculation that you make then, and you say, okay, I get it from a base standpoint that Jacob Zuma has such a huge following all over the country. The calculation there is that perhaps enough of those people are going to be with us. But you could see it from the first local government election. I think you couldn't run for the first ones at the local government level. Then the national elections. You could see that it's not translating into those fans, like Jacob Zuma, voting for you as the alternative, even though you were explicitly saying that if you vote for Ramaphosa's ANC, you are voting for whiteness to continue to fester. Alternatively, you can vote for Black First Land First, which is for all black people in this country. And even then, it didn't result into them voting. What it meant then was that your own core, which was always going to vote for you, when it says stop talking Zuma, stop talking Gupta, was alienated in the first place, and you could not get the votes that you were counting on from outside. That's obviously hindsight. You could not have known that.
I mean,
at the time.
It's an assumption that we can make, that we lost votes as a consequence of the positions that we took.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to actually prove that is in fact the case.
Yeah.
But it still begs the question: why didn't they vote for us? Because they didn't. The ECG comrades did not come to the party.
Absolutely.
Despite the fact that we stood and we there was a lot of pushback. But with Zuma and the Guptas and even Bushiri, it is something which is consistent with our ideological orientation, which we say, well, if you get attacked by the main enemy, it is our duty to defend you. Now, there's a secondary contradiction which then tripped us in a sense, where people are saying, well, these people themselves have their own problems, and therefore you're justifying the wrongs that they do, and therefore we lose the kind of support that we could naturally have amassed. It's a calculation that we have made. It's a risk that we took, and I think we paid very heavily for it. A lot of our comrades in KwaZulu-Natal are very clear that we must stay away from Zuma, we must stay away from Bushiri, we must just do our own thing.
Yeah.
And that is the conversation right now in the movement.
Yeah, and that's South Africa in a nutshell, that you don't underestimate how much they hold a view one way or the other. You see it with Operation Dudula. When they say, don't speak against this, we have a problem. Like, it's like you are even trying to revoke my citizenship, because I want to speak against it, but in a nuanced way. In a loving way. I want to tell you that, those people are not the primary contradiction, really. It's the capitalists that you should be fighting. But when South Africans are convinced that Zuma is the problem, of course inspired by the white capitalist media, then it's like it's a huge miscalculation if you're going to support Zuma.
But that you lose in the numbers game.
Yes.
Hopefully you can gain in the ideological orientation and building a layer which can translate to numbers another time. Because we are a revolutionary movement, we cannot follow the whims of the people, more so if those whims are reactionary. Like now, there's a big call on us to support Dudula, because it is the emerging thing. It is a thing that is current. It is like, I mean, even there, Dudula members on my social media, they keep on saying, what is your position on us? What do you say about
for sure?
South Africa first?
And I've seen people saying that Nhlanhla is making more inroads than you, an experienced member in the space, is doing better than you. You know, so there's that pressure as well for you, for your views to coincide with him, so that now in Mhlambi you can attract a following.
Yes, I mean, if we play pure politics and we think in pure numbers, and I think that is what Gayton is able to do, because he's not detained by any ideological orientation.
Yes.
And therefore he can join Dudula, call this, they must go and all that goes. But we are beholden and driven by an ideological position. And that does make us conservative in terms of certain ideas and very rigid in terms of certain readings. What you can hope for is that with time, the correctness of your position becomes realized and the majority starts seeing that you were in fact right. But you don't know when the turn is going to be. And so you must keep on the correct ideological orientation, and hopefully we can get the minimum required for representation. I mean, this is our desperate hope.
Yeah, I know that in the last elections as well, you made, you said outright that the elections are rigged. To what extent do you think they are? I know that you provided proof thereof that there were members of EPLF that voted in a certain ward or in a certain school, but when they calculate that school, there's no votes for PLF, for example. So that's like a very clear indication. But do you think they are rigged to the extent that if white capitalism sees that when they are working it out, the ANC, which is their party, is not going to win, they will make it win? Do you think it's at that level?
Well, South African electoral system is very complicated, but there's a lot of room for, corrupting the system and so on. Votes not being counted. But the corruption actually happens prior to the voting date. It happens with the resource mobilization. I mean, the ANC and DA and EFF, they spend over 500 million. Up close to $1 billion, I believe, in these elections, each of them.
Each?
Yeah.
Oof, that's a substantial amount.
Yes,
of money.
I believe. I mean, if you one billboard, those of Julius everywhere, is 100,000 a month, and he had them throughout the nation for about 3 months, and then he had the posters up to the most rural village, and I mean that's another, I would say, at least 150 million. I mean, we had about 100,000 to run the elections. So the inequalities are so huge.
You've already lost by the time you get to the voting day.
That's right. And then of course the media also in the last national election, the way we were put into a court process, locked into court processes.
Sorry.
Basically, we were unable to do the work, and we were projected again as mad, and all that goes with that.
I mean, you were cleared only by the IEC 4 days before, or something like that.
Yeah, very close to that. So a lot of people thought we were not on the ballot, and then Patrice Motsepe took us to court the day before the elections. We were in court. We were unable to do any real campaigning. But 20,000 people votes were counted in our favor.
That's a strong number.
Yes, and we need
relative to the money that you spent.
Yes.
So if you want to increase that by tenfold to be 200,000, you would need to spend 2 million.
That's it.
But 200,000 is the equivalent of how many people in parliament? Because 2 million is a reachable number. It's just a matter of talking to the right people, obviously, and mobilizing the right resources. But 200,000 outright votes guarantees you how many seats?
I mean, at least 10. At
least 10 seats. So it's a workable. You got to 20,000. You got a workable number. Like, it's a great start. That's the way I would look at it. Like, it's just, and if you've spent precisely 100,000, then you would say if you spend 2 million, or 1.5 million, then you can hopefully double the number to 10 seats. That's a sign for hope in the future.
Yes, I mean, we just need to get those resources and give it a good shot, and let's see if we can get the representation, because the key thing is to get representation.
Absolutely. Do you think, I mean, the DA will never need funding? The Freedom Fund Plus, will never need funding. Even the most obscure white Afrikaans party will never need funding, because for as long as they are white people, there will be white business people that sympathize with them. Do you think black business or black capital, as tiny as it is in relative to the South Africa's economy, maybe it could be 5% or less, do you think black business people need to be conscientized to support movements like yours?
Yes, but there's a big risk. You know, one of the guys in the last national elections who gave us a bit of money, immediately his tax affairs were messed up. He got out of business.
How was he found out? Like, how did they know that
he made a transfer into our movement?
Oh. So what happened? Like, who flagged it? It was
obviously
a significant sum.
Well, it was about 20,000. It's not even a lot of money.
It's not a lot of money.
But clearly what happens is, who runs the banks? You know, the banks is all, the same enemy. And so they must have seen that this guy, and then they attacked him, put him out of business, followed him viciously, aggressively. So black business is very vulnerable, and it's not going to come out and support a project which is inimical to the real enemy. So that leaves us with the possibility of getting money from outside of the country, from other black people who are radical, or we have to find the money amongst the people. We just have to find a solution to that. Yeah,
I mean, that's shocking. That's very shocking to hear that people can be harassed. But that's what happened when you don't own the country. We are just renting.
Yeah, we are tenants in this country.
Yes, tenants. Yeah. Unfortunately. Let's wrap it up then, my leader. Maybe let me take a little bit, 10 or so minutes of your time. Dr. Francis Cress-Welsing says that the system of racism, white supremacy, is driven by the need for self-preservation. She goes at length in explaining it, but in paraphrasing it, I would say that she says whiteness realizes that when a black person mates with a white person, a black person emerges from that union. And whiteness realizes that if this continues for the next 50 years, there will be genetic annihilation, and those are her words. And she's probably right too. She says black is the superior genetic material, and she's right too in that. I read a lot of her works and listened to a lot of her lectures as well. Do you think whiteness is driven by that? Do you think that whiteness innately knows that in order for it to avoid being in the same spaces as us, and avoid them through sexual intercourse destroying themselves, they will continue playing these games of creating the distance between us, biochemical warfare amongst us, and so on?
Well, the positionality of whiteness is antagonistic to blackness. It is driven almost innately towards attempts to annihilate blackness.
Sure.
And so any interaction between black and white is calculated from the white perspective to destroy blackness. And so they're going to guard the white genetic pool. And on the other hand, generate stratagems to mass kill black people. I mean, if you see all these new diseases, the impact they have on black people is disproportional to so there is, in a sense, you can argue, biological warfare, which is part of the ideological warfare of whiteness to decimate blackness. And at a deeper level, it is true that even at the genetic makeup, the black project is much stronger. But they've been able to whiten reality. I mean, they've taken the pyramids from us. The whole Egyptian civilization, which is completely black, has been whitened. And we've been wiped off from that. And so, even physically, if you're black and you think that you are not under threat, you are like a chicken that goes to Kentucky and think that, go to KFC and think that there's a party going on there. If you are a black person, you have to know you are in imminent danger. They've erased a lot of black achievements, such that even in our country, if you were to ask a question, a very simple question about, for instance, 1976, the leader, the students there, they say Sarafina is the leader of 76. I mean, I went to my former school in Mngxube in Soweto, and I asked the high school kids there, they said Sarafina. I mean,
So Ms. Mhlongo was in Sarafina. And Whoopi Goldberg was in Sarafina.
But this is part of the whole erasure of blackness, of black thoughts. And even at the biological level, there's also an attack on the black body. We are a endangered species, literally. And that is why we need to engender black love, black survival, black unity, and exercise the power that we have to defend our species.
All right, finally, I got a call from Upura Jack talking about your health. At that time, for 2-3 days, I believe that I'm going to get another call to say that you are dead. In my head, you passed away. Not through the lack of faith. I'm just forensically and cold-heartedly look at situation and, this is what's happening here. I could be terrified about it, but this is what's happening here. I reached that conclusion in my head as I heard that you were in a coma. You emerged from that, and I spoke to your wife, and it was so beautiful to know that you were okay and healthy. I then had to think what has led to this point. I'm a conspiracy theorist. You spoke out against COVID when it was not cool to speak out against COVID. I had my thoughts about the COVID, but I didn't talk about it publicly because I knew what game was playing. What happened to you? Do you believe that your health was compromised as a result of your position, or do you naturally believe COVID? I will never believe it, but that's a story for another day.
A lot of people have implanted the idea of a conspiracy against me. A lot of people that I speak to have suggested that it was a deliberate attack, precisely because a lot of people who spoke against COVID actually end up dying.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, the president of Tanzania,
yes,
John Magufuli, died. I think a few other African countries.
You know what happened in the NBA, in basketball? There's a player called Rudy Gobert. The day that COVID was announced, he was being playful in a press conference, and there were multiple microphones. So what he did was, he was like, I got COVID. And he touched all the microphones. He was being playful. 7 days later, he had COVID.
Yeah.
And he was bedridden. But he's fine now.
Yeah.
And I was observing all of these things at that beginning. I was like, I'm not going to say anything about this, even though I believe you.
No, I mean, I take the conspiracy seriously. Chavez was murdered by a biological welfare project because he was anti-imperialist. I believe all the time there is a conspiracy against black people. There's Absolutely. A conspiracy against black leaders of a particular hue. So I did not rule out any foul play in my situation as well. But people prayed. I went, my heart had stopped for 2 minutes. And I went into a coma for 3 weeks.
Your wife told me everything.
Yes.
It was such an emotional phone call.
Yes. I was under. And of course, I mean, when I was in that situation, I saw visions of certain things as well, and I could hear certain things as well. But it was a very difficult time. I mean, I was literally dead.
Yeah, and it was such a. I was defeated because I knew, like, I was trying to work out in my head who is the natural successor of this voice. Because Julius Malema is, in terms of being an orator, but then again, if you will see through a lot of the stuff. Yeah, well, so I was like, ish, we can't lose this kind of a leader, you know. But in a way, I think we lost you. We lost the robust you. You are now coming into being an energetic man. We lost you. You were so, even this conversation, I would never even dominate it like this before, you know, because you were such a firebrand, you know. But I'm so happy that now you're just a little bit mellow, but still your intellectual properties are still as sharp as ever.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm being given a second chance. I need to use it effectively and make the contribution that I'm meant to make. So we'll see in the near future what happens.
Because
I greeted Steve Biko a little bit there.
You came back talking God, but obviously you've always dabbled in spirituality.
Yes.
I think it's more of an ideological point of view that because black people are spiritual, it's something that we cannot just dismiss if we want to reach to our people. That's my interpretation.
No, absolutely. I mean, Steve Biko was not Steve Biko, Marcus Garvey, Sobukwe were actual Christians, practicing Christian. They understood the project of Christianity as colonizing, but you can also use it as a double-edged sword to fight the same colonialism through fighting Jesus, and that goes with that. So and our people are Christian. So if you want to engage them, you gotta make them think of a fighting God instead of a God that says, give the other cheek and you will be okay in the other life, which is part of the colonizing kind of sermon. We have to fight in all aspects of our lives, including sports.
Tina Silva itenye last week. And in the phone, on the Junior Kanye, but I'm watching this podcast. He watched the podcast begrudgingly. He's like, I don't want you and your Junior Kanye, but I like the guest that he just made it specific that I am not here to watch because you are here, because I don't like you in football. But I am here because I like the guest. So, yes. Mgxitama, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thanks for the conversation.
There you go. Thank you very much, guys, for watching. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thank you. Like, subscribe, comment. Thank you very much for watching us.
Thanks.
Nkululeko on Cultr.